Welcome, and watch me, Jake Williams, and Dr Loretta Breuning discussing her book, Habits of a Happy Brain, Retrain Your Brain to Boost Your Serotonin, Dopamine, Oxytocin, and Endorphin Levels. In this discussion, we discuss how mental fitness or health is vital for long-term happiness. For example, healthy emotional regulation results in increased focus, memory retention, relationship building skills, and ultimately will lead to our chance of succeeding in all areas in life, including finding the right partner and maintaining long-term relationships. We can utilize the information outlined in Habits of a Happy Brain to take control of our behavior instead of engaging in automatic responses to our environments and experiences. The practical examples provided will help readers develop tools and learn about their physiology, psychology, ancestry, and evolution. It facilitates the reader to make peace with their mammalian neurochemistry instead of finding fault with it. This lecture will cover the key areas that we need to focus on to build a new brain which is mentally fit so we reach and accept our full potential. Join us now. Welcome to everybody, and thank you for joining us today and taking your time to come and learn more about your own brains. The purpose of Project Mental Fitness is to really kind of educate people into how their minds work so they can utilize the information available now due to science to create themselves as much better reality as possible. So just a little bit of the background of how this has come about. I'm obsessed with the brain and have been since a child, but about 4 or 5 years ago, I read Habits of a Happy Brain, and it substantially shifted my conception of my own happiness and how I could basically hack my own brain and my own reality to just become a much happier person. Ultimately, that there are also some key fundamental truths that it outlines that I will touch upon and question upon as we kind of go through, but I don't want to take up too much of the time. So that being said, if you are interested in obviously coming to further lectures, please follow us in whatever method you can. And I just straight away want to get into it today. So would you like to go over your work
Yes.
then, Loretta, for us?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
So, usually I do a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm so tired of that, and I thought you may be tired of it too. So I'm going to try to make this more interactive. So, and especially because some people may even have read the book. So I'm going to talk about real life examples of what triggers our dopamine, what triggers our oxytocin, what triggers our serotonin and endorphin, and get some examples from you so that we can really brainstorm a wide variety of strategies for triggering these chemicals. First, a simple introduction. So why do I focus on these 4 chemicals? So we have 2 brains. We have the cortex, which is the pink fluffy part that you see in pictures. And then underneath that, we have the limbic system, which includes all the little bits and parts with names that you've heard about. And that's basically what animals have. So if animals have a cortex, it's tiny, and it correlates with, primates have more. And amazingly, you'll see in my books, it correlates with the length of the childhood that an animal has. And humans have a far longer childhood than other animals. And so the idea is that without a cortex, you're pre-wired from genetics. But with a cortex, the whole value of the cortex is that it learns from experience rather than from being born hardwired. So the chemicals that make us feel good and feel bad are inherited from earlier mammals, as well as this limbic system that controls them. So the animal brain is not capable of language. Without that big pink fluffy brain, you can't abstract, you don't think about the future or concepts or generalizations. It's just, this is good for me, a happy chemical is released. This is bad for me, an unhappy chemical is released. But how do you know what's good for you? Is whatever triggered your happy chemicals in the past. So it sounds like a chicken and egg, but you can imagine a little baby born and accumulates experience or a certain amount of genetics, just depending on the species. And soon it gets wired to go for it when it sees something that meets a need, and pulls back when it sees something that could bring harm, as defined by past experience. Now, you may be saying, well, I don't associate happiness with meeting a need. I associate it with higher values, et cetera, et cetera. I know all that. But it's however you met your needs in the past wired you to feel good when you see that. So let's move on to dopamine, because that will explain a lot. So imagine you're a little monkey and you wake up in the morning and you're hungry and nobody is going to feed you and you don't have a refrigerator or a supermarket. So you look around for food. And when you see something good to eat, that triggers your dopamine, because past experience with food turned on the good feeling and paved the neural pathway between something that meets your needs and a good feeling. So now you're saying, oh, I'm going to go for that because that will relieve the pain of hunger and meet my needs. And the next part of dopamine is, can I get it? So if a monkey sees a piece of fruit that's too far away or is next to a snake, it's not going to go for it. So past experience built a wide range of circuits that tell you, yes, this is something I can get and I'm going to go for it. Now imagine a person going into a pub and maybe they see someone special who attracts their attention, and dopamine turns on and you say, oh, I can get this and it's going to meet my needs. But maybe you're thinking, a lot of people say, oh, what about if you look at the stars or walk in nature? So we can save that till later, but let's just say that on the internet or in popular media, like every few years, there's some new simple answer. This is the way to be happy. And it gets oversimplified. So I'm happy to address any of those. We'll have lots of time for questions and interactions. By the way, Jake said that we're going to only go for about 35 minutes and then have a break, and then we'll do some question and answer, and you'll have time to write your questions. But first, I'll tell you something that stimulates my dopamine, and then Jake will tell you something that stimulates his dopamine. So I love to travel. So when I have an opportunity to plan a trip, I get very excited. And the funny thing about it, you can't spend your whole life traveling, and well, you could, some people do, but I can't spend my whole life traveling and planning trips. So I sort of save it as my treat. So at night when I'm tired, when I want to do something fun. So instead of stuffing my face with food, I spend a few minutes researching my next trip. Now, the funny thing about it is my husband hates to do that. Like if you have to choose a hotel in a city you're in, like he hates that, and I love it. So it just shows you the deep level of this wiring. Now, how did I get to love travel? Well, when I was young, I had this family that never went anywhere. And then my father got a free trip handed to him. Then he got another free trip handed to him. It's a long story, but that wired me. Now, when I was a teenager, I had lots of problems. And so what did I do when I had a problem? I started planning a trip, and I got a part-time job to save money for this trip. And I did everything myself. My parents were totally against it, but it wired me to say that planning a trip is the solution to all your problems. So you can think about it and see how you might have some equivalent to that. Now, Jake.
So just to echo what Loretta says, if anybody here wants to participate by putting examples in the chat of your kind of experience of why you think dopamine has been so important in your life, then please do that. And then during the break, as she said, please just write up questions as we go along. If any comes into your mind, we'll have a 10-minute break and then we'll come back and we'll answer all of your questions. But so for me, as I kind of grew up, some people probably may know me here from the chess community in the UK and the London chess community. And I when I was younger, you know, we didn't have very much, but what we did have is we had a computer and we had a chess program on it on a floppy disk. So when I was younger, I remember just getting so many hits of dopamine from like succeeding at chess and winning. And then when I was going to school, which will go into serotonin, of also getting a lot of pride of winning. So now I'm an adult. I spend time reading and watching chess games, and to some people probably is the boringest thing the most boring thing in the world. I'm constantly trying to convince my wife to come to my chess club with me, which she just refuses to. But I love it, and I can talk about chess for hours, and I have such a wonderful time doing that. And I know that is related to basically
Early circuits.
releasing circuits, and so many of them for me for that particular game. I mean, it pretty much hits all of them for me, but dopamine as well, from for wanting to get that win,
planning
planning,
stimulates dopamine.
thinking ahead. And it's and it's so interesting with gaming, and you speak about this in your book and you touch upon it with gaming, is that it's such an effective way to get dopamine. And and that's why it's become, well, I think it's the fastest growing industry now in the world, gaming. And there's no surprise to that. It's not only because we perceive it as fun or that it passes time, it's because we're experiencing this biological driver behind it. But yeah.
Yeah, good. Now, and it's interesting that when you plan, it takes so much of your cognitive power that you can't worry and plan at the same time. So if you're a kid and you're thinking about what's my next chess move, our brain is designed like you have to carry all this information and manipulate it in your head. That's abstraction. That's what humans can do that animals don't do. And it uses up your energy, and you're not worrying about what's going on around you while you're doing that. Now, for traveling, so our brain is designed to forage. So my Stone Age ancestors were always looking around for food in order to survive. Now, when I'm traveling, that's really what I'm doing. It's like using that impulse to look around. So thank you for everyone who contributed, and we'll talk more about that later. For now, let's move on to oxytocin. So oxytocin is often called the love hormone, the bonding chemical. It's the warm and fuzzy feeling, and people often oversimplify it. So we're told that, oh, you just want to hang out with your pals, and people are suggested this as if this is like the simple solution to make everybody happy. But if it were that easy, then you'd already be doing it, right? So why is it hard? Well, think about it in a few ways. First, if you're a gazelle and you're out looking for food and you smell a predator, you run toward the herd for protection. So it's not really helping the herd, you're helping yourself by running to them toward protection. So it's important to remember that, because when you are in a herd, you want that protection. When you're not in a herd, you feel unsafe. But then when you're with the herd, you're like, hey, what is he doing? That's not making me safe, that's hurting me. So we're very critical of our herd mates. And when a gazelle is with a herd, they don't like grass that's been peed on by other gazelles. And so they'd rather trot off to greener pasture in order to find their own food without getting poked by the other gazelle's horns. So we mammals like to spread out to meet our needs and get dopamine, but it's the risk of the threat of a common enemy that makes us pull back into the group. So when you're isolated, you look for the protection of a group, but then when you're with a group, they get on your nerves. So you tend to blame that group, but it's so helpful to see how this is just sort of a natural response. So an example in my life, well, I'm not going to talk about politics per se, but I think you can easily see that this is what's going on with politics. And I live in a very politicized part of the country. I think everybody's sort of politicized now, but part of this is because this is how leaders appeal to us with a common enemy. So whether it's a leader or the media or some little social club that you're in or the boss at work. They are calling your attention to who is the common enemy of that group. So when I worked in the sales department always had conflict with the marketing department. But then once we have the common enemy of another company, then the sales department and the marketing department join together to fight the common enemy. But then when there's like a risk of the industry suffering, then your company and the other company join together to fight that risk to the whole industry. So this is how mammals work. And when I figured that out, it was such a relief, because before then, I thought, what's wrong with me? Why can't I find the right group? Why is every group I'm in so bad? Or why am I not as lovey-dovey with the group? Is it my fault? So now, Jake, what's your experience?
So my experience within group behavior has been, as I think it's quite common actually with quite a lot of people. I mean, in my 20s, I generally struggled quite a lot with group behavior, and I didn't really want to kind of be put inside a box with other people, because I kind of felt myself to be kind of a bit of a loner and a bit of a maverick, I suppose, growing up. But over the last like 5 or 6 years, I've very much done a lot of group behavior, and I've definitely seen the benefits of that. I actually run a group here in London called Talk the Walk, and a lot of people would have come through on that channel. And what we focus on there is walking around and talking to stop isolation. And even though the concept of doing it, and when I'm doing it, it's wonderful and stuff, but still personally, I feel like sometimes, I want to pull away from that and be separate from that, which I think is quite normal. But
yes,
the idea of being together, being a large group, especially on some of our walks, we do them around central London. There can be 200 or 300 people of us, by the way. So
wow,
yeah, they're very large groups, and it very much is kind of like us and them kind of like situation of the pedestrians, and then we're all together as a massive herd. And
hilarious.
I can see it is hilarious. It's such good fun. But I can see kind of the herd mentality of people coming together, really enjoying the organization. And I haven't really kind of seen a social movement like it, where people have become so kind of infused and enthralled for it. I mean, people are constantly messaging us, asking us to do walks and really trying to push us forward for it. And I think that is like a very good example of people wanting to be a part of the herd in that large kind of group of numbers, but also having the benefit of being able to come away and have some time by yourself. Because a group,
yes, exactly,
200 or 300 people walking around central London
that's great.
it's very,
Now,
it can be a challenge.
that's funny. I will definitely come and participate someday. So, and it's fascinating when he talks about like the pros and cons of like, then you want to get away from the group. So with every one of these chemicals, there's a downside as well as an upside. I explain this in all of my books. And in the modern world, whenever people have these frustrations and trade-offs and disappointments, we're fed this idea that I must have a disorder, there must be something wrong with me. And so I'm very eager for people to understand what's natural, so they don't so quickly jump into the idea that they have a disorder. Because once you think you have a disorder, that's sort of comforting, because then you think, oh, somebody can cure me. I don't have to deal with this because I can get fixed. And I don't think that's helpful. So let's move on to serotonin. And this is the complicated one, because the nice word for it is pride. But your inner mammal is really always looking for the one-up position. And how do you know that you're in the one-up position? Well, first, you're always comparing yourself to others. And then when you're in the one-up position, if you are a monkey, if you're in the one-down position and you reach for a piece of fruit that's near a stronger monkey, they will bite you. And it's studied, for years. Nobody likes to talk about the bad side of monkeys, but they will bite weaker monkeys when they take food. And so monkey is always comparing itself to others and finding an opportunity to meet its needs when it is the bigger guy rather than the smaller guy. And it's so easy to see that this is what our brain is always doing. Now, we think we shouldn't do it, think it's wrong, we think it's nasty, and in fact, we think the other guy is doing it. And that's why I'm just doing it because he's doing it. He's putting himself above me, and that's why I'm struggling to put myself up. You can't acknowledge that actually when you put yourself up, your brain releases a little bit of serotonin and it feels good. So let's just say you won a chess game, you feel good, you get some likes, you feel good, whatever, you're gardening and you create a plant that shows your skill and that improves on the plant you created in the past. So anytime you create something that you're proud of, that you take a step that you're proud of, that you compare favorably with others, your brain rewards you with serotonin. And so as much as you want to say we're all equal and we shouldn't compare, but you keep comparing and then you blame others for doing the comparing. So it's such a relief to remind yourself, hey, I'm doing this too. I want the serotonin. Now, the hard side is when you compare and you see yourself in the one down position, your brain releases cortisol, the survival threat feeling. And the reason for that is the cortisol tells the monkey, whoa, pull back, don't grab for that food because you're going to get bitten. So, simple example, I have a job and there's a promotion opportunity, and I would love to get that promotion. And so I think, I imagine how great I would feel if I had that job. That's serotonin, like, wow, I have this new job. But then I look around and I think, oh, I'm never going to get that job because so-and-so is more qualified and they will probably get it. So I'm putting myself in the one down position and triggering my cortisol. Now I look around for another job that I think I can get. How do I do that? I'm comparing myself to others. When I finally find, oh, I think I could get that job, that's dopamine because of the search aspect, and it's serotonin because I have compared myself favorably with others. Now I apply for the job and I think, oh, I'll be happy forever if I get this job. So let's say I get the job. Am I happy forever? No, because the serotonin doesn't last. And then we look for other ways to put ourselves in the one-up position. And so the first way to solve this is to first, as I said, be conscious that you're doing it. And the second thing is to find other ways to put yourself in the one-up position without putting others in the one-down position. So a simple example is if I write a book and then constantly check on the numbers of my book and other people's books, I'm just going to feel bad. So I don't do that. So I just never look at the numbers. So what do I ask myself, and I'm really old, right? So at my age, what do I really want in life? And the one thing that I want that like I don't have is the ability to say the truth. Like I just want to say what I think is true. And that's like such a reward for me. So then I feel proud when I find an opportunity to say the truth rather than just, oh, I'm just going to say what's popular to make other people happy. So that's just my little niche. And I'm not saying you should do that, because when I was trying to pay my mortgage and feed my kids, I had to bite my tongue, which is why, there are some rewards to getting old. So Jake, your views.
So an example of that, particularly with checking things, I mean, I think that a lot of us probably are are sinners when it comes to that. And I have been in the e-commerce realm for quite a long time, and I used to constantly check sales. And I remember the first about 12 years ago when I started selling online. And I remember getting the first sales, and they'd come through as emails on my phone. Back then it was a BlackBerry, and I would just get such a rush, and I just kind of never stopped that kind of checking. And every day I would go through and I would And it doesn't matter day to day when it comes to running an actual business. It doesn't make a difference. You wanted to take a look at weeks or months or quarters, really, or years after a certain time. But I know that I would get a good hit of feeling prideful and being like, you know what, people like my stuff. They want to buy off me. I'm doing a great job. And then, but on the back end of that, I would take a look at like competitors and I'd be like, but those guys are doing better. And it would just make me feel terrible about my performance, even though my performance was massively above the average. But nevertheless, like the comparison to it just dragged me down ultimately and really damaged my mental health, is the truth of the matter. And similar to you, I mean, I've kind of become aware of this, particularly over the last few years. And I've applied a lot less importance to these things. And what I have noticed has become much more important to me is you want to say what's true. I want to find out the truth because I'm still completely unsure what it is. So so that for me has become the ultimate. And that's not something I really need to check on moment by moment or something I really need to report to other people because I'm still quite confused by the whole subject, to be honest, of what is true in any regard. And one of the reasons why we're doing this now, and just to make a final point, I just want to say, obviously, a lot of people have kind of these experiences, and the great thing about this kind of platform is we're talking about like modes of thinking or behaving or even obsessing, and kind of bringing to the forefront of everyone's mind is what you guys are doing actually is quite normal. Like if you're obsessed about something, or if you're, really constantly comparing yourself and putting yourself down, and 1 second you're the best, the next second you're the worst, it's not that abnormal as behavior. So, but the more you become, the more you understand how your brain functions and how it works, the more you become aware of it and stop feeding that story, or at least catch it early on, like catch the train before it leaves the station and before it kind of gets out of control. Or that's what I'm able to do now. Not all the time, because I'm not some sort of guru, but I
Yes.
practice this sort of stuff.
Great. And once again, I'm not wagging my finger at you and saying you should not check your numbers, because if a person observes themselves and they say, this makes me happy and does not make me miserable, then it's good for you. But let me explain, why does it make me miserable is because I feel like I don't have control over it. So when you check your numbers, if you feel like, oh, I just need to do this and this, and then I'll get more rewards. But if you think, I don't know what to do, I'm powerless, I can't force you to click that button. So that was my early experience. I was powerless. I couldn't get anybody to do anything. So I need to focus my attention on things that give me a sense of power rather than things that trigger my sense of powerlessness. So let's talk about endorphin. And somebody actually just wrote about running. And so endorphin is the chemical that causes runner's high. And I am not advocating this, I want to say from the beginning, despite because you hear so many people advocating it. So I want you to know that, because I live in a place where many people, they run to the point of self-injury. And it's because they've been indoctrinated that the good feeling of endorphin is the only good feeling available. So they're not really understanding dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. And endorphin is the body's natural opioid. It's only triggered when you run to the point of pain. And so if you always inflict pain on yourself to get that high, that's just bad news in the long run. And so that kind of high, it's just for a short time. And it doesn't give you the reward of dopamine, of meeting and finding a new way to meet a need. It doesn't give you the oxytocin of giving you a social group that you trust. It doesn't give you the serotonin of being proud of your accomplishment. It's just opium, So, and you need the opium because you're inflicting pain on yourself. So it's like a bad cycle. And to illustrate that cycle, I use the example of stepping into a hot tub. Now, I love stepping into a hot tub, but once I'm in the hot tub, 5 minutes later, I don't even feel a good feeling. Then my brain is on, what's the next thing I'm going to do? So how could I get that good feeling stepping into a hot tub? It's endorphin because it's pain. And then after a while, your body adjusts and the endorphin stops, and your body needs to feel pain to know when you're safe. So what if I made the water hotter? That would trigger more endorphin, but it would be a crazy, stupid thing to do. So now you see that we are not designed to seek endorphin. We're designed to seek the other chemicals, but not endorphin. And a simple daily life example of endorphin that's happened to me plenty of times. I fall, I take a big fall, and people say to me, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I get up and I say, "Yeah, I'm fine." But 15 minutes later, I'm in terrible pain, and I realize that I'm not fine. That's endorphin. It masks pain for the first 15 minutes. And then you realize if you're injured, it's designed to help our ancestors take action when they're injured so they could save their life. And then it stops because you need to know when you're injured in order to protect yourself. So the bottom line that I explain in all of my books, laughing triggers a little bit of endorphin because you're activating some deep inner muscles. But we're not meant to chase it. But if you want to get some more in your life, plan to laugh. And that sounds strange. How can you plan to laugh? So the first thing is make time, obviously, for some entertainment that you like. So don't just go along with what your friends like if you think it's not funny. Find what you think is funny and make time for that. The second thing is when I say plan, I often have to look at a long list of comedy to find something I like. And if I do that when I'm in a bad mood, I just end up feeling worse because of all those things I didn't like. So I triage the list in advance so that on a bad day, I have a list of things I actually like. And finally, in order to get the endorphin of laughter, give yourself permission to laugh even though you think it looks stupid. Many people have the automatic habit of suppressing their laughs because they think it makes them look bad. And then you miss out on the endorphin. So if you have that automatic laugh suppression habit, learn to notice and go back to how did I create that and how can I create an alternative? So Jake, what's your endorphin story?
So if you ever need to have a bank of comedy, you can always hit me up because I guarantee you I have quite a few. We're really blessed over here, obviously in the UK, because we've got some great comedians. I know you're a fan of Ricky Gervais, as I am. Kevin Bridges is actually playing this week up in Angel Comedy. If anybody's around to see that, it'd be amazing. But I am a comedy junkie, 100%. I just love stand up. It makes me feel so good. And yeah, and I mean, I try to consume it at least daily, and I'm, my memory is not so great, like us all. So I tend to have the benefit of being able to rewatch some of the stuff that I've seen before, particularly obviously Kevin Hart's earlier works, which is wonderful. But similar, I mean, when I was younger, I used to be an exercise junkie, and I used to do a lot of kickboxing and a lot of fighting in kickboxing and cage fighting. And when I did that, it was all about endorphin really, and pushing yourself massively over the limit, really, really, really smashing yourself. And then, you would train, and you would train to take leg kicks, and you would do it with pads, and then you try and do it without, and you'd have massive bruises over your legs and black legs and bruises all over you.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I played tennis with ladies who would take aspirin before the game. I thought that's a crazy way to be healthy.
It is a crazy way to be healthy, but if you're in an environment where kind of it becomes the standard, you become crazy. Yes. Basically.
Yes.
But I knew by the end of it that not by the end of it. I knew kind of throughout it what was going on was very bizarre and was very unhealthy. But then at the same time, you know, I felt a part of a community. I was enjoying the respect that I kind of got off people, telling them, oh, I do this crazy sport. So there was a lot of other things. But I remember one particular time, and I was so pushing myself doing a training session, and I just closed my eyes and I could just feel the whole physiology of my whole body rushing. And it was an amazing, amazing feeling, you know. But how difficult is it to get that feeling when you can just go to a comedy club? It's just madness, really, you know.
Yeah. Great. So let's have the 10-minute break now. And during that time, people can put in their questions or their examples that they want to share of how to stimulate each of the chemicals. And then, Jake, do you want to start with people asking questions out loud or with the written questions? What do you think?
Well, if you would like to ask a question out loud, please feel free, and just send me a message and just say that you would like to do that. I believe that you used to have the function on here to raise a hand on Zoom. Do we still have that function?
Yes, there is. Go to click reactions, and then
Yes.
under reactions below the icons, it says raise hand. And please do that. And if you would like to show your face when you're raising your hand, you're welcome, but it's okay if you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so
and just to let everybody know, this session is being recorded and it will be published online. So if you are going to do that, you're allowing us to publish that online. So just please be aware of that.
Okay, so
thanks.
What do you want the restart time to be?
So let's come back at 10:02, so about 7 minutes from now. So take your time, go to the loo, grab a cup of tea, and we'll see you all in about 7 minutes and answer all your questions. Please feel free to stay during that time. And thanks, everybody.
So what I always say is plan a long run goal, a short run goal, and a middle term goal. And then you will have the ability to shift between one goal and another. So when one project gets blocked, you could shift to another, and you will always be giving your brain that feeling that you're moving toward a goal. And like with Jake's chess story, many activities stimulate all of the chemicals. So chess gives you the dopamine of planning, but it also gives you the oxytocin of a social group and the serotonin of public respect. So in whatever activity you like, look for all of those elements and then make a plan.
I think, from my perspective, I heard a story about a test that was done where people were paid to build sandcastles. But every time they built a sandcastle, they would get kicked over and they would have to build another one. And after a while of building the sandcastles, the reward that they were getting wasn't satisfying, and it wasn't going to make them want to build any more sandcastles, even though they were going to get paid every time. And I've got a feeling that's where I've got to. I do a huge amount of work with my autistic son, and I've got other people that I'm helping along the way.
And you don't have a sense of accomplishment. It feels like you're not making progress.
Oh, no, I'm not going to say that.
Oh.
I can see the accomplishment in 90% of what I achieve. But one problem is purely replaced by another. And
this comes back.
Some of the people that I'm working with, that is repetitive. No matter what I do, I might solve a problem, but it's a little bit like sticking a plaster over a leak somewhere. 2 seconds later, another leak pops up in a different area.
So also our brain habituates to rewards. I always use the example that when I walk into a coffee shop where they're grinding coffee, it smells so good that I'm ecstatic. But if I spent my whole day working in that coffee shop, I would stop smelling it. So whatever progress you're making in your work, you've already adjusted to that and you don't get excited about it anymore. So you're hoping for something new and bigger. That's what our brain naturally looks for. If you think of a caveman who found a pond full of fish, well, that's nice, but if you go back to the same pond full of fish every day, it doesn't excite you. So if they found a bigger pond full of bigger fish, then they get excited. So as much as we don't like that new and improved urge in ourselves, it is the natural, normal thing.
Okay, thank you. That's making
You're
sense.
welcome. Shall we move on to Rudik?
Before we do that, should we touch upon, Nicola asked about cold water therapy. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I know that it's very popular, and I hear about it from a lot of readers. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's exactly this endorphin thing of creating pain in order to get yourself going. So I don't like it. Anyone who doesn't like it, it's fine. It's not like a should. But if it is currently working for a person and you're not doing it in a way where you end up getting sick, or that you have to make it colder and colder every day to keep doing it, then let's think about it. Well, some people have coffee every morning and that gets them going. And the coffee, you don't really notice it because you have it every day. So some people are trying to go off coffee and some people are not getting enough of a jump from coffee. So what is it you're really looking for? Sometimes it's because a person isn't getting enough sleep and they need this jump in the morning because they really haven't gotten enough sleep. So everyone just look at the deeper levels and think about basic needs and real physical needs. And if it still works for you, fine, but it's not like I advocate.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think that things can get quite out of control quite quickly when pushing on those extremes. We all know that with coffee. I think all of us detox every once in a while.
Yeah, and that's the amazing thing, that the detox works, and then coffee actually feels good when you detox, which is why I only have it every other day, so that on the coffee days I wake up and it's like, oh, it's a coffee day.
They're the best days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so next, Charlotte asked, how do you relearn what is good for you when you have wired your brain in unhelpful ways?
Great. So think about the unhelpful behavior. It's just a pathway. We all have unhelpful pathways from our past. And I'll give you a great example of one that almost made me cry. I saw this on Dr. Phil. It was a young man, when he was growing up, his mother would come home from work and she would say, oh, I feel awful, get my pills. And he said to himself, I'm never going to do that when I was young. But his body physically learned to go get the pills. And so when he grew up, the only way he had to respond to negative feelings was to go get the pills. And so you say to yourself, that's just a pathway and I can build a new pathway. What does it take to build a new pathway is repetition. So every time I feel bad, instead of doing that old behavior, I'm going to do this new behavior. And you're going to construct a new behavior that you actually like. So I'm not telling you to go eat lots of vegetables, but it has to be something you like, but is less damaging than the thing you're already doing. And then on day one, do not expect it to feel as good as the old thing, but to know that within 45 days, if you repeat it every day, you will build a new pathway and then you will flow there. So it will just feel normal to you. So.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. I think that covered that really well. The next person, Rutvik, I've asked you to unmute. Do you want to ask your question? Because you're next in line now. There we go. Rutvik, are you there?
Rutvik? Okay.
Rutvik, that's it.
I don't know. I just thought I'd try to.
Okay. Send me a direct message if you want to, Rutvik. Let's move on to the next one, which was Sarah. So do you know what exactly the feeling of self-efficacy is when we look at it from a neuroscientific perspective? What are the ways we can stimulate it and make a person with a generally low feeling of self-efficacy to experience it more. And just for those people who don't know what that means, I've actually put a description in of what self-efficacy means. So just check the chat log for that.
Good. So an interesting example of self-efficacy is the one that Brett raised about having your sandcastle wiped out every time you build it. And in the study he mentioned, the people were getting paid to build the sandcastle. So they still got the money, but when the castle was wiped out, you have this feeling of nothing I do matters. And that is just a pathway in your brain. You could be telling yourself nothing I do matters, or you could be telling yourself what I do matters. Either way, whichever pathway you have, you will find evidence to prove it true. So if I think nothing I do matters, I'm going to find evidence to prove it true if I think it matters. And of course, it's not all one or the other, but on a certain activity, I have a sense of self-efficacy, whereas on another activity, I don't. And that's how we choose our activities. So the real question is, how can I have it in a new area? And many people possibly are thinking about work. So work would be like the sandcastle. Maybe you're still getting paid, but you don't have a sense of accomplishment. Now, in order to deal with this, we need to be realistic, because the modern educational philosophy is to tell everyone that they're going to change the world. And when you compare what you're doing to the idea of changing the world and going to Mars and seeing all these superstars and thinking, oh, I have to do something huge and everyone's going to applaud for me, and I need that to have self-efficacy. So in order to deal with that, what I did was I read, just as a hobby, I love to read biographies. And I learned that almost all of the people who we admire today had a terrible life, and they did not get applause while they were alive. And they kept going anyway. So if people only did things that got applause while they were alive, nothing would ever have improved and nothing would have been done. So if you are finding that you need external approval, you need, young people are taught, oh, somebody's got to tell them every minute, go for it, you're great, you're awesome. The word awesome is now used for everything in the US, and in the UK it's brilliant, right? Everything you do is brilliant. So that is not realistic. So do not think that other people just have self-efficacy easily. So a simple way to start is to take small steps and then notice the reward from the small step. And just like the dolphin I talked about before we started, give yourself a reward immediately after you take the small step. And I have a really funny example. I used to have a drawer where I kept my socks. And every day I could not close the drawer because it was too full. And every day I wanted to take time out to clean out my sock drawer, but I never did. And one day I said, darn it, today's the day I'm going to do it. And I hated it because every time I would look at a sock and decide where to put it, it would have a bad memory attached of, why am I holding on to this sock? Because I still need to do X, I still need to do Y. So it was all the unfinished business. So I set a timer for 10 minutes and I said, I'm going to work on this sock drawer for 10 minutes a day until I could get it to close. And you can't believe how happy I was after the 10 minutes of working on the sock drawer. I had such a great feeling of accomplishment. And that taught me that small steps toward clearing an obstacle, that it's hard to take the first step, but if you reward yourself, I had to have a reward after the 10 minutes, that you feel great. So make it a small chunk and give yourself a reward after.
I think that's a really good point. I've actually noticed in my life when I've taken away like small things, even like preparing food, and I'd have someone prepare all my food for me, for example. I noticed myself actually becoming, initially I'd be like, this is amazing, I get all this lovely food made for me, but after a period of time, I'd noticed myself becoming less and less happy because I'd be focusing on big picture things that would take months or years to achieve. And I wouldn't ever get those wins of, I don't know, cleaning up or making a lovely meal. And it's just vital really for long-term happiness. And no one probably ever thinks that if you ever get in a position you can do those, that you don't have to do those things, but actually those things make you incredibly happy long-term.
Yeah.
So,
You know what? My example of that is caramelizing onions. When I've been working too long, I go to the kitchen and cut up onions and caramelize. But I always have something fun to listen to while I'm doing it. And then I'm anticipating how delicious my dinner will be. And like I prepare dinner really fast because I've done all the hard parts in advance.
Yeah, nice.
As a break from my work.
So let's get on to Melissa now, because I think this is a big one. A lot of people would like to know the answer to is, how can I get my boyfriend interested to do exercise with me? Well, I think my wife wants to know this answer.
Oh, how she could get you to exercise with her?
Well, we actually began that in the beginning of this year, so I know the answer, but well, for us anyway.
Oh, okay. So there's a few answers. I'm going to try a few answers because I know that you've already probably tried a lot of things, right? So maybe what Jake is thinking of, in all of my books, I write about mirror neurons, where you mirror the pleasure or pain of other people. So I use the example in the book that when I met my husband, I hated to floss my teeth. I did not want to floss my teeth. And then I saw that he did it every night and it didn't bother him the slightest bit. He just did it. And I just saw that, like, to me, it seemed like a horrible, like, ow, it hurts. It's not fun. It's horrible. And then I saw that it was possible to do it without pain, without suffering. But in your case, your husband has already seen you exercise without, so that may not work. But it may be that your husband is feeling one down. Like maybe you are acting one up about your exercise and putting him in the one down position. So he may need to find his own realm of exercise. If your real goal is for him to be healthy, he may need to find a kind of exercise that's fun for him, and either add the element of a dopamine accomplishment, or, you know, a serotonin pride or oxytocin socializing that works for him. Or if you really, really want him to do it with you for some specific reason, and maybe you could adjust it in a way that makes it more fun for him. And again, don't put him in the one down position, and then give him a reward after that, and he gets to choose the reward. And like I said, about maybe if there's a one up, one down thing going on, could try being honest about it. Like maybe you feel one down because your husband is better at you at X. So you like to remind him that you're better at Y. So you got to look underneath of what this dynamic is and look with all the chemicals.
And this is exactly what worked for me, by the way, is we made it fun for me because I didn't really want to get back into kind of doing exercise so early in the morning. So we made it fun for me. In addition, we linked it with coffee for me. So I'd have a coffee on the way there. And finally, after, I would go and sit in the jacuzzi after I exercised. And that, compounding that as like reward, strenuous activity, reward, just allows me to develop that habit personally. Yeah, I think that's great advice you gave her there. This is very interesting comment here from David, is going back to childhood memories. Are these permanent, or is there a way of rewiring through neuroplasticity? I think what he means is, because obviously we can't change memories, but does he mean behaviors that are associated with maybe memories that he has had?
So a lot of people are using the term neuroplasticity for basically what I'm calling building new pathways.
Yeah.
But the term is being used as sort of a magical term. Like neuroplasticity requires the work of repeating the new behavior a lot, because when we're young, neuroplasticity is effortless before age 8. It just happens without conscious intent because we have a lot of myelin. But when you're 20s and over, neuroplasticity requires a huge amount of repetition. And the example that makes it so obvious is when you're a child, you learn language easily. There's still a lot of repetition involved, but you build those big pathways. But what about if you try to learn a new language in your 20s? It's work. So that's the work it takes to rewire your emotions and your behaviors as well. Now, we all know it's possible to learn a new language. People do it every day. But if you're not succeeding, it's because you haven't done enough repetition. And that's why the rewards and the small steps are what make it possible.
Yeah. Exactly.
And speaking of rewards, I want to answer Laura's question. What was my reward for the 10 minutes of cleaning out my sock drawer? Okay. Yeah. So I write about this in my book, Tame Your Anxiety. So you remember when clutter was this big fad, like fighting clutter, and everybody was going to get rid of all the clutter in their house and become aware of how harmful it was to have clutter in your house. So it was part of that, and I was actually having a hard time, and I hired one of these clutter consultants, and she was the one that gave me this idea. Make a list of all the things you love to do that you don't give yourself enough time to do. And then choose from that list whenever you do a decluttering activity. So as I mentioned, comedy was one of them. Another one of them was, the watching TV series that I talked to Jake about, and not feeling shame about watching TV, because I'm not watching it in an aimless way. I'm watching it in a limited way after I do the accomplishment. And my particular treat that I always talk about, I love watching things in foreign languages. So I watched a whole 70-part series in Spanish, 70-part soap opera, sort of. It was the story of Pablo Escobar. And my experience is that when I watch something, and it has to be a language I know, and it absorbs me. I'm working so hard to listen to the Spanish and to read the English and to watch the pictures that I can't worry. I can't think about anything else. So it completely clears the slate. So I love to do that. And so that's how it's like, I'm not going to watch my Spanish soap opera until I do my decluttering task for 10 minutes. And the other funny thing is, if I set a timer for 10 minutes, that helps me get started. But often I want to continue after the 10 minutes.
Thank you so much for that. So this is going to be our final question now, and this is from Sarah, and this is a lovely question to end on, which is, how does dance and maybe other means of self-expression help our brain to be happy?
Great. So there's a few things going on here. First, one person likes dance, another person likes painting, another person likes music. So there's no should here. I'm not saying that any one particular art or craft or hobby is better than another. So you can look at the thing that you like. Jake and I have reading in common, and in fact, reading self-help books at certain points in our lives in common. And then actually I got to the point where I didn't even enjoy self-help books anymore. Probably saw them as competition right after I started reading my own. But whatever is that hobby that you love, you can think about, when did I first get to like that? And so for Sarah, who likes dance, I bet you can think about the time in your life when you were first exposed to dance. And probably one or two things were going on. One is that you had positivity associated with it. You were with people who either they loved it and you felt their pleasure, or they complimented you and you felt their respect, or they included you and you felt that hurt. But the other side of it is the negative side, that when you were having sadness in your life and you went to dance, you immediately forgot about the sadness, just how I forget about everything when I'm watching a Spanish soap opera. So it's both of those. And when you find the roots of that thing you love, I know it sounds boring because people want to say, oh, dance is so, you want me to say higher values and something lofty and philosophical. But if I did that, then one person would say only dance reaches that peak, and another person likes astronomy and they would say that astronomy is better than dance. And so I'm saying they're all equal. It's what works for you. But what if none of them work for you? So let's take on that challenge. And one part of that is, if none of them work for you, it's because you're feeling overwhelmed and you think, I can't take time out. I got to worry full time. I can't take my eye off the ball because if I stop worrying, something bad will happen. So that's where, excuse me for saying, but food and even worse addictions than food that's why people have these addictions, because they only give themselves permission to stop worrying when they do that really bad thing, because of, again, that early circuit of that first time when that addiction relieved it. So find a compromise, find a way to give yourself a small treat and take a small step. And so this is, again, for the person who likes dance, I explained it, but for the person who doesn't like anything, try dance for 5 minutes, try cooking for 5 minutes, try gardening for 5 minutes, and see how you feel about it. Oh, and the other one thing is, when you try it for 5 minutes, you are not good at it. And you may be hassling yourself because you think you should be good at it. And that's the other thing about, if you're putting yourself in a one down position, you can't enjoy anything. So what can you do without caring about being good at it, but just to do it for 5 minutes and then put on a timer and try something else for 5 minutes?
I think that's absolutely wonderful, wonderful, wonderful advice. And the reality is I think that when you're not enjoying anything in life, you know, you're in a terrible, terrible position, really. And I've been there, as I'm sure a lot of people have been at different stages of their life. But and I think that what you're saying is true from my personal experience of just spending a few minutes trying something, and you do find a way out, and you will find something that you enjoy eventually, and then that will turn into something that you're enjoying for hours and then days, and then maybe the thing that you end up doing with your life, who knows. But you certainly can find something, is the truth behind that. It just takes all of this, what you've spoken about today, which we've kind of only really touched upon. All of this is work, and it's the work that you put in to retrain your brain so you can be as functional as possible, really, and as happy as possible. And that is different for every single one of us, because every single one of our brains is different, based on our experience, and potentially also on our physiology. So sorry, go on.
Oh, and one other interesting thing, when you find that thing you love, after a few years, you may not love it anymore. And then you have to go through this whole thing again. And people asked about music. It's definitely true. You know, I say, you find that song that you just love, but then at some point you may play it so much that you don't love it anymore. So my book explains that then you have to start with new music, and then you don't love it in the beginning. So there's a sweet spot in the middle. And you can't have a guarantee that you will always be in the sweet spot all the time. And like Jake said, it takes a little bit of work, but you can learn to think of the work as fun.
And I think, as an example of that, I think we kind of heard Brett say that today, which is he's still feeling the accomplishment in working with the children that he's working with, and he still is succeeding, but he just got no more joy out of it. And of course, that happens to us all as well. But knowing that, and knowing that's normal, I think for so many people will be a gift, because instead of saying what's wrong with me, as in like your character assassinating yourself, that something's wrong with you or your brain, there isn't actually. It's normal. And there are methods that you can use to get around that. And if you hit walls, there's always an answer now. We know enough about a brain, enough about behavior, where we can come to answers to almost any problem, or at least propose answers and experiment with those people who are experiencing those problems. But that being said, we should wrap up now, because people are still kind of filtering through as well. People are kind of still joining us. Unfortunately, sorry for the people who have just joined, because we're just wrapping up. But Loretta, if you would like to share some of your wonderful,
please
share your website. Loretta, by the way, is not only PhD teacher, researcher, author. She also is the head of the Inner Mammal Institute, and you can check out her website here. I think you've also posted the link to your book there. I recommend you read it. If you can read it 100%, I would really recommend that.
Thank you. And I put the links to some of my other books, and I put my email if you want to ask me a question. But if you don't like to read, my website has a lot of videos, and it has resources in a lot of different languages, and it has a simple step-by-step method. And I hope you'll join my newsletter list. It will pop up, and you'll get a free 5-day Happy Chemical Jumpstart.
Nice one. Thank you so much. Honestly, thank you so much for your time. Like, it's been wonderful having you here, and thank you for joining us and helping people by sharing your message. I hope that everybody else really enjoyed it. If you want to get, I'm going to try and do as many of these as possible. Trying to get amazing academics join us. So if you would like to find out more about that, I'll also put in some links here. There's a ton of them, so check them out, and we'll try and bring you more stuff. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a great day, and I wish you all the best. Take care.